You get to play with board breakers. You do not get to play with hand traps a lot of the times. Hand traps are either a mild nuisance that doesn't do anything or turn ending. There's way too much variance. And in that variance, a lot of skillless players beat a lot of skillful players. What's good, YouTube familia? There's a matter at hand that we must discuss, and that is, are hand traps or board breakers more healthy for the game? Which one? Let's get into it.
Draw your last pathetic card so I can end this, Yugi.
My grandpa's deck has no pathetic cards, Kaiba, but it does contain the unstoppable
Dueling Wave.
Before we get into the video, I just want to discuss the Discord real quick. The plug is happening yet again because we want to grow the Discord. The two things I want to discuss mostly about the Discord are, we have our own custom ban list called FK format. We have the same standard, forbidden, limited, semi-limited, unlimited that you see in the current TCG, but we've also added our own little custom flair that's really nice. Opens up a bunch of new dimensions for our format, which lets us balance the game and keep things like Kick Kalos, Halkifibrax, Isolde, and Beatrice all legal and not affect the game in a negative way. And point number 2, we have tournaments every single month, 2 per month. We're about to fire up one really soon. So if you're interested in something like this, go to our Discord, go check it out, sign up, go check out the FK format ban list, and go introduce yourself because we'd love to meet you, love to talk to you. So please come down. Anyway, let's keep it moving. Hand traps, board breakers, hand traps, board breakers, hand traps, board breakers, hand traps, board breakers. Which way of deck building is more healthy for the game itself? Is it when you're forced to play hand traps more in a format, or when you're allowed the freedom to play board breakers? First of all, let's just define our terms. Hand traps refer to the set of cards that are either monsters or traps, usually that can activate from the hand with really no lead up whatsoever. It's a complete surprise that just drops itself from the hand, interrupts your combo, looking at your opponent with your D in your hand. The goal here is to not let you complete your combo by interrupting you mid-combo or at the start of your combo to give you a half board or a non-board whatsoever, because it stops you completely from playing. Notorious examples include the infamous Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring and the new modern-day scourge of Dominus Impulse. Now, by board breakers, what do we mean? We mean the set of monsters, spells, and traps that usually trade that one card for multiple cards on the opponent's side of the field. They trade 1 for 2 or more. Notable examples include the legendary Raigeki, Dark Hole, modern day staples such as Evenly Matched, but it can also be even cards like Dino Wrestler Pankratops and whatnot. Now, which of these ways of going second is more inherently healthy in modern Yu-Gi-Oh? So this is sort of a dilemma. Modern day Yu-Gi-Oh is in a very interesting position. You know, one card combos do more than ever before. One card, if it gets through, you're just a lot of times it feels like cooked. So the dilemma comes down to, do you hit them on the one card combo and pray they don't have extenders, right? Because in modern day one card combos, it's not like, oh, we hit it somewhere and then like they get a lesser board. Usually it's, okay, we activate the starter, hand trap, extender, hand trap, and then usually like the person won't have any more hand traps. If you have the third extender or the second extender, the third starter / extender, you play through that, it gets through anyway. Usually that's full combo, and the opponent with the hand traps loses automatically. There is no way for them to come back. So then the dilemma becomes, do you run the hand traps? Do you run the board breakers? Because the board breakers will just say, okay, I don't care about your extenders. You're going to have extenders, almost like go ahead, have extenders, but I know you're going to make that same standard cookie cutter board. So like whether I let you hit you with that one hand trap or 2, I'll just wait, let you do it, and then hit you with the board breaker at the end anyway. The first instinct here is to say that hand traps are more healthy inherently, because ultimately what they'll do is you can use them at any moment, turn 0, whatever. Even if you went first and you have some hand traps in hand, you can help defend yourself if you get hand trapped. They also trade 1 for 1. Sometimes they become a -1 in card economy because like cards like Valor and Imperm will negate an effect but not remove the monster, so they still have the body to be able to do whatever they please. Aside from some notorious examples, Furas. But I'm here to push back on that idea. The reason people feel so obligated to run hand traps in their decks currently, it comes down to 2 reasons, in my opinion. So hand traps stop your opponent from playing and gives you an easier time playing into their board. Most players don't have the confidence in themselves to go second and just play into a board with engine and board breakers. Most players feel that if they don't hand trap their opponent, they feel that they just got FTK'd, which a lot of times isn't the case, right? They feel that if one board breaker doesn't automatically deal with every single problem that they're presented with in this turn, that they auto lose. Where in modern Yu-Gi-Oh, yes, turns are a lot less, right? There's less turns for you to play, but nothing in modern day Yu-Gi-Oh says you can't initiate into a grind game. And that's kind of what board breakers allow. Another reason people prefer hand traps is because just generally there's more good hand traps than there are good board breakers. So if you want to make deck building a little bit easier for yourself, all you do is just throw in some hand traps into your deck build, into your side and your main, you're good to go. And it'll probably will function somewhat decently well. Now, board breakers are a little more targeted in what they deal with, even though they do not target in themselves. But what I mean by that is some board breakers destroy, right? And if the current meta doesn't care about destruction because it can float or it's immune to destruction, those board breakers suck and you don't play them. Other metas that have lots of negates don't care about cards like evenly matched, because evenly matched plays really badly into negate formats unless you draw multiples of certain board breakers. Which gets me to the next point I wanted to make. The number you have to draw. With hand traps, you need more than just one. You need multiples, sometimes 3 hand traps or more even, to be able to stop your opponent from playing. While with board breakers, if used correctly, you can do enough damage with just one. For example, compare the impact that one Ash Blossom gives you versus one Super Poly. Board breakers get up in them guts, if you know what I'm saying. So now, back to the point of the video. What is more healthy for overall game experience? I would like to reaffirm that it is board breakers. Why is that? It's because both players theoretically get to play. Of course, decks like Yugioh exist, which functionally work to FDK your opponent. They even can invalidate cards like Dark Ruler, which is perhaps the most fair board breaker that exists in the game. These type of decks make board breakers crap, and quite frankly, they even make hand traps kind of crap, because a lot of times you'll draw 3 hand traps against Yugioh, and they're still in a great position, because you still only have 2 to 3 to start your stuff, and they still were able to make at least like a Phantom and something else, which is insanity. But that isn't none of this is an indictment on board breakers themselves. This is an indictment on garbage card design by Konami. They don't know how to make balanced decks, and if they do, they refuse to because they want to get sales by pushing a quote-unquote anime archetype. What do you do, fellow kids? Remember GX? Konami, please stop with the BS genericness. This isn't Yugioh, you're not fooling anyone. It's just Link Fiend spam. All this does is use Yugioh cards to do their dirty work, because you didn't place any restrictions on new cards, so they can all just be mishmashed together, basically since Power of the Elements. Just like Rockets are a disguise for Dragon Link. Oh, I'm playing Rockets. No, you're not. You're also not playing Yugioh, you're playing Fiend Link Pile. If Degen didn't exist, such as that, in the game, board breakers would shine, and Yu-Gi-Oh! By extension would shine. When playing against board breakers, you have the chance to go fully off. Sometimes you're going to draw a great hand with four starters and extenders where no hand trap would have stopped you, but more often than not in modern deck building, you're going to draw 1 starter, 1 extender, maybe a 3rd extender. You're not drawing God Hand every time. So what functionally happens when you play hand traps into those type of hands where you don't draw God Hand, you draw just okay, you'll have your 1 play. Let's say, for example, my recent YCS Niagara experience. You'll draw 4 non-engine and 1 ostinato. You'll drop the ostinato, your opponent will ash it, and you are just locked out of that game. There is no playing. And if their engine can initiate any kind of grind game quicker than your engine can, which Melodious, if Ostinato's gone and you don't top deck into maybe like a Refrain, you've got nothing. So it became just a hand trap war. They established some minute grind game where they were able to make like a Seals through my hand trap, and then after that it was just over. But in a board breaker format, those type of hands, let's say it's not hand traps, right? You're running Ostinato and then you have a bunch of other stuff that's not usable in this moment. Guess what? You can go fully off, make your full combo, and now your opponent can then crack back into that board with their board breakers with their engine. They Dark Ruler you. Cool. Guess what? You don't lose that game. Like, you don't lose that turn. You get cracked back. Oh, they evenly you. Okay, bounce my board, because a lot of decks have interaction now. Bounce my board. Don't lose this duel, and they get to set up. My guys come back, and now we've both played. We're both about to go in on each other. As opposed to what actually ends up happening with hand traps. Most modern games that involve hand traps are sling it at your opponent. They can't play, you can't play, you can't play, they can't play, and then one of you will top deck into a one card combo, and all of a sudden, wow, there's no more hand traps left because we spent them all. And guess what? Once that one combo goes through in modern Yu-Gi-Oh, it's all over. But with a board breaker, you're basically saying, yeah, you can have your starters, your extenders, I do not care. Go fully off and I'll just clear you. Whatever you establish, I'll deal with that as a puzzle. Now, sometimes that doesn't work, but overall, it can work if Konami removes the FDKs out of the format. And let's say you have one starter in your hand. You're facing down a hand trap. You cannot outmaneuver that hand trap. No matter what you do, if your opponent just drops the hand trap, it's over. But if your opponent has a board breaker, even if you have that one starter, you have all your tools at your disposal. You'll start your combo, be able to play, and then you can make your board skillfully in accordance to whatever board breaker that would beat you in that moment. So you'd play around that board breaker. Okay, Lightning Storm kills me. Defense mode, right? Ooh, Raigeki kills me. Okay, well, I'm going to play some card that can either maybe negate Raigeki or that can make my board impervious, or in the Melodious case, bounce my whole field to protect them from destruction, or use Summoned Elegy to be able to protect from destruction. Okay, evenly matched. Cool, I don't lose. Like I said, Dark Ruler. Again, I don't lose. We get to both play. You invalidate my board, sure, and you can maybe even clear my board, but I've have graveyard set up, hand follow-up, everything you've set up. Didn't lose any cards to negates, and I lost some cards, sure, but I don't lose any life points, and I get to crack back on the next turn. And once these board breakers are dropped, and if you aren't killed, which funny enough, like the ones that no one runs are probably more broken than the ones that everyone runs, such as like everyone runs like Lightning Storms and Evenlies, those type of cards in modern day. Raigeki and Dark Hole and Harpies are probably still more broken because you can use them at any moment, whether you draw into them or whatever mid-combo. You can just drop them and your opponent all of a sudden is on the back foot and you get your battle phase. While stuff like Evenly, Dark Ruler, and those modern day floodgates, actually, even though Evenly is unbelievably broken, you still don't lose, which is pretty interesting. Unless you're like a control deck where you set a bunch of traps and you get Evenly. Okay, well then you do lose. But the chances of crackback and the chances of grind game initiated is very high in this scenario. But a lot of games where hand traps are involved, they are non-games. It's show me your hand, I'll show you mine, and we'll know who wins. Because more than likely, your opponent will know when to hand trap you. It'll just be like, okay, here's the guy, and then you look at your opponent like, almost like how you look at your parents if you got a bad grade on your report card, and you're like, oh God, please don't notice, please don't notice. And then when your opponent notices, you just lose. Hand traps kind of, in a weird way, luck sack your opponent, where what I mean is they had the one starter, you had the one hand trap, and that's that. And then they don't have your hand trap for your starter, you win. There was nothing. You could run that game 100 times back. There's no way that it goes any other way. But with board breakers, if you get cleared by a board breaker, you'd be like, dang, I forgot to play around that one. Next time you could, with the same hand, play completely differently around that board breaker, and then you don't lose. Wow, holy crap. It puts the onus on you to play around your opponent, as opposed to, yes, can you play around hand trap? Sure, but you need multiple cards to do so. Sometimes you just don't have it. For an example, if you go first and you Snake Eyes Ash, I know, we hate Snake Eyes. I hate Snake Eyes too. I've never played it. I'm just giving you as a scenario because people understand Snake Eyes. You go Snake Eye Ash, normal summon. Your opponent imperms you. Bonfire, Ash. All right, you look at the rest of your hand. You have like a Flamberge Dragon and like 2 hand traps. Your opponent goes. They normal summon their Snake Eyes Ash. You imperm. That's 1 hand trap. They bonfire. You Ash. The same hand. But their 6th card was Witch. Boom. Right? Like, there it is. You don't have the... Like, it's just a hand trap war. It's count the hand traps, count the starters, and that's exactly what ends up happening. Or God forbid, their 6th card was the Azamina engine, where they can just invalidate one of your hand traps, and now all of a sudden, like... 1 hand trap versus Snake Eyes, that doesn't do anything. But now I can hear you say, oh, but that happens with board breakers too. Well, if I do set up my board and my opponent draws evenly, oh my God, that's an auto win. And sure, that's partly correct. You're not wrong. Board breakers are not perfect. But where it's inherently different is that you got to play. In the first example, you didn't play. You played a monster. Like, if you want to count summoning a monster and activating a spell card as playing, that's not technically playing, right? To actually be able to enjoy the game, not just summon, stun, activate, stun, right? That's not playing. You actually got to play and fully go off. But then let's say your opponent goes Dark Ruler, Lightning Storm, or Dark Ruler evenly. Cool. Okay, you blew up my board, probably a lot of my resources. It's a flaw of the modern decks. They have to use a lot of their resources, so evenly feels like a game ender. But if decks were designed a little bit differently with having stuff in reserve, like extra deck resources and deck resources, all of a sudden you could, okay, I don't lose this duel, goes back to me, and boom, we've got crackback. You get to play with board breakers. You do not get to play with hand traps a lot of the times. Hand traps are either a mild nuisance that doesn't do anything or turn ending. There's way too much variance. And in that variance, a lot of skillless players beat a lot of skillful players. When you run board breakers, it gives the player all the options. And if you've noticed, if you play 2 decks where there's no hand traps and it's just board breakers, it doesn't matter who goes first or who goes second because you both will play. And the interrupts that your opponent can actually play, when you remove the hand traps being in the hand, the decks actually aren't that bad. Because most decks will put up like 2, 3 interrupts, 4 interrupts, whatever, which still is doable. Let's say a board breaker can trade for 2 interrupts. All you have to do with the rest of your hand, 5 more cards to play through 2 interrupts. It can be done. It's doable. The problem is also with these hand traps is when an opponent goes first, goes full combo, and still has 3 hand traps. So they'll have their 4 or 5 interrupts plus 3 hand traps in hand. Those 3 hand traps functionally make it impossible for you to be able to beat them, or be able to even like attempt to play. There's been plenty of times where my opponent establishes board, I deal with all their stuff, and I can now engage in a grind game, and the one power play I needed to go through, it gets ashed or impermed or veilered, and that's the end of the game. Because you can't play through boards and a hand trap in reserve, or a couple hand traps in reserve. And that's the problem with hand traps. The only board breaker that functions like a hand trap is kind of like Forbidden Droplets, and that requires a lot of resources. Board breakers are awesome. This video is not about crapping on hand traps a little bit. This is about loving on board breakers. Guys, do you love board breakers? Let me know in the comments down below. If you lose to a board breaker, if you lose to Lightning Storm, put your guys in defense. If you lose to Evenly, hold some stuff in reserve. I'm sorry, hold a little bit in reserve. You don't need 9 interrupts. You can get by with 5. But if you lose to Ash, what could you have done? Run cross out, maybe? Right? Like, that's really it. Or you could do the very skillful thing and run thrusts when they ash you, and then you go, okay, here's a floodgate for a turn. Here's D-barrier. Here's different dimension ground or whatnot. That's the kind of game we want to play, like the D-gens and OCG. No, thank you. But hey, that's just like my opinion, man. What do you guys think? What are your opinions on this topic? Where do you stand on this side of the aisle or this side of the aisle? Do you like hand traps more? Do you like board breakers more? What's more skillful and what's more interactive and what's more fun to play with and play against? I like to discuss these type of topics with the community, so please comment down below. While you're down there also, do not forget to like the video because that really helps get the video out to people. Share this video and subscribe to the channel because that helps the channel so much. Last thing, if you want to continue down the YouTube rabbit hole, check out this video. Otherwise, I'll see ya in the next one.